return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Shana Tova and good morning. And once again, it is really a beautiful thing to be able to share this time with folks in person, beautifully masked and socially distant, and also in so many different places virtually. I have my laptop open right here. So does student Rabbi Jenna Shaw, who I'll reintroduce to you in a moment. So chat at us right now. We can already see that you thought you were having technical problems because we started a couple minutes late. So we know you're out there. Chat at us, give us a Shana Tova. You can chat throughout the service. We would love for you to do so. Yeah, we'll be looking at that throughout. So once again, I'm Rabbi Hannah Speer. This is Michael Allen. You're used to seeing us up here on the high holidays together, and we're really lucky this year to be blessed by the presence of student Rabbi Jenna Shaw. They're in their penultimate year at Hebrew College, a rabbinical seminary in Boston. Because I just came back from parental leave a few weeks ago, we knew we were going to need some extra Torah, that I couldn't prepare everything in time for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we got some really beautiful Torah in the form of Jenna. So if you were tuning in or here physically last night, you heard them speak, and you will again today, and we're really lucky for that. I just want to make a note. If you're here in person or came to pick one up, you'll have a machzor, a prayer book in hard form. But if you don't have that, if you're tuning in virtually, go to the Havurah website, and you should be able to find a link to an electronic machzor, an electronic prayer book that we'll be using together today. And yeah, let's get started. We're on page 44. Please read with me. Today, we concern ourselves with tshuva, turning from ignorance to truth, from darkness to light, from evil to good, from conceit to compassion, from self to life. Turning is the key to survival. The seasons, the plants, the galaxies all maintain their existence through turning. Our turning, too, is in the natural order of things, holding the key to our survival by returning us to holiness. Page 49. We'll sing together in the middle of the page. פתחו לי שערי צדק, אבוא ועמודיה. פתחו לי שערי צדק, אבוא ועמודיה. זה השור אדוני, צדיקים יבואו בו. זה השור אדוני, צדיקים יבואו בו. פתחו שערי צדק, הבובם הודיה.
In just a minute, we are going to turn to Nishmat Kohai, the blessing for breath. Some of us may not have taken a breath yet this morning. So as we sing these words on page 54, an invitation to just breathe. Allow yourself to feel what it might feel like to just be, breathe in, and breathe out. Nai, 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 nai. Na 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 I nai 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 Nishmat Kohai Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Nishmat Kohai Tevarech et Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu
Page 57. Turn to... 57? Oh, we're not on page 57 yet. 54. We're still on page 54 in the middle of the page. And it's good that we have a time to figure this out because this is going to be an attempt at a 3-part harmony. You can pick the part that resonates most with you. We're going to be invoking different elements of nature, different parts of our world, and even the galaxy around us, and also our own bodies. So whatever it is that you want to focus on in gratitude to get you into the place you want to be this morning, and whatever part of this you want to try to sing, Ilu Finu. We're in the middle of the page. Ilulu, 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 finunu, malele shirakayam, 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 ilulu, 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 ilulu. Page 57, for real this time.
In just a minute, we're going to rise on page 57 for the Barhu. I often tell my teens that I work with that the Barhu is the Jewish pump-up song. If you take yourself before your favorite football game or sporting event, think about that huddle. What is it that the coach says that inspires you to jump up? My teacher, Devin, teaches that prayer is an exercise in empathy. It invites us to look up and see those around us. It invites us to see as others are praying, connecting, or reflecting internally. The call and response nature of the Baruch is both an invitation and a call to prayer, but also a call to each other. It calls on the leader to say, community, are you ready? And are you ready to be in this with me? The community then responds, yes, but only when the community is ready. And then the leader can respond, I see you, and if you're in this, I'm here too. So we rise to begin our call to prayer and our call to each other. We rise if we're able on page 57. Baruch hu et Adonai Amvorach.
Baruch Adonai Amidah Le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Le'olam va'ed.
You may be seated, and I'd like to welcome up the Levine Kaufman family to lead us in a responsive reading on page 58. And as with all of our readers who are here in person this morning, you will come up to this microphone, and if you're comfortable doing so, you can remove your mask, put mine on while you're up here. And
Our faith allows us to question, to argue, to challenge. In your image did you fashion us, and you are obliged to be with us. We can hold you responsible. We can struggle with you for all that seems unjust and ugly.
we can contend with you. We can ignore you. We can reject what we do not understand.
And yet we turn to you more fervently, bound in gratitude because you set the succession of seasons, change the day's divisions, arrange the stars in the sky, create day and night.
God of the faithless and God of the faithful, God in all forms and formless, who was and is and will be, you are the eternal.
The art of living successfully requires that we hold two opposite ideas in tension at the same time. First, to make long-term plans as if we are going to live forever. Second, to conduct ourselves daily as if we were going to die tomorrow.
Let us not fear that our life will come to an end. Rather, may we fear that it shall never have a beginning. It is said that a long life may not be good enough, but a good life is long enough.
We can make up for the brevity of life by heightening its intensity. The waste of life lies in the love that we have not given, the powers we have not used, the prudence which will risk nothing and which, in avoiding pain, misses happiness as well.
Every one of us is given the gift of life. If it is preserved jealously and selfishly, it impoverishes and saddens. If it is spent for others, it enriches and beautifies.
Our life's work is the continual remaking of ourselves, so that at last we may know how to live. Life is action and passion. May we embrace these attributes, lest we be judged not to have lived. Let our lives not be like a brief candle, but rather like a splendid torch. May this torch continue to burn brightly as we turn it over to future generations.
That's your call.
A number of years ago, I started the tradition of watching the musical Rent on Erev Rosh Hashanah. I was drawn to this tradition because the musical demonstrates a group of friends grappling with life, love, and loss, and asking the questions of what it means to live a life. During one of the show's major songs, they asked the question, what does it mean to measure a year in life? Over the last year and year and a half, we've experienced so much. We've fluctuated between decisions and indecisions. We've gone backwards, we've gone forwards. We've stepped sideways and stepped back. And when I think about the things that have held me over the last year, it's the slight end of a phone call with a friend where we say, I miss you and I love you and I can't wait to see you. So when we think about what it is that we can use to measure the last year, think about those you love. Think about what it feels like to love, because that is truly what it means to measure a year. We'll turn to Havurah on page 59, the prayer in which we celebrate and scream out the ultimate power of love, both for God, for ourselves, and for the community.
Havurah, ahavtanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Havurah, ahavtanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hamarta gedola v'terach, hamarta leinu, Avinu malkeinu. Hamarta gedola v'terach, hamarta leinu, Avinu malkeinu. Havurah, ahavtanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Havurah, ahavtanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Let's sing together in the bottom of page 59 in celebration of our tradition, of our Torah and our mitzvot, and the love that we get from observing them. Ve'aher einenu b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, ve'yached levavinu, le'ahava u'yira et shemecha, v'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, v'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, v'shem kodshecha hagadol ve'hanora batachnu, nagila v'nismecha, nagila v'nismecha v'yeshuatecha. Gathering together the four corners of our talitot, we pray for mutuality. We pray for a peace that we will truly find when every single person finds their safe and loving home. V'havienu le'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz, v'tzolichenu komemiyut ve'artzenu, ki el poel yeshuotata, ובנו בחרת מכל עם ולשון, וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל.
Amen.
Page 60. We join together in Hashivenu for a return to our truest selves. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Echad, Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Echad, Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Echad, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kegedem, Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Echad, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kegedem, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kegedem. Together we read, "May I return to my true self and be strengthened as I continue my journey of tikkun halev, repairing the heart, tikkun hanefesh, repairing the soul, and tikkun olam, repairing the world." I'd like to invite Jen Kemp and Dan Glucksman to offer a piece from Elie Wiesel.
One of the just people came to Sodom, determined to save its inhabitants from sin and punishment. Night and day, he walked the streets and markets, preaching against greed and theft, falsehood and indifference. In the beginning, people listened and smiled ironically. Then they stopped listening. He no longer even amused them. The killers went on killing, the wise kept silent, as if there were no just people in their midst. One day, a child, moved by compassion for the unfortunate preacher, approached him with these words, "Poor stranger, you shout, you expend yourself, body and soul. Don't you see that it's hopeless?" "Yes, I see," said the just person. "Then why do you go on?" "I'll tell you why. In the beginning, I thought I could change humankind. Today, I know I cannot. If I still shout today, if I scream, it's to prevent humankind from ultimately changing me."
The Shema is a declaration of faith, a pledge of allegiance to one God and to the awareness that we are all united within God. We are meant to say it when we wake up in the morning and upon going to sleep at night. It is said when praising God and when beseeching God. It is the first prayer that a Jewish child is taught to say, and these words are the last words a Jew aims to say prior to death. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Tirov Malchuto Leolam Vaed Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך
וקשרתם לאורות ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Immediately after our central pledge, we move to action, the actions of loving and of teaching that love and of remembering those mitzvot in so many ways, one of which are the tzitzit and our talitot. So I'd like to welcome up the Zwern Williams family to offer for us a poem by Rabbi Ruth Adar that's not found in our machzor. So listen up. If you have a talit, you can hold it close to you. And if not, or even if so, maybe think of some of the other reminders we have in our lives.
The psalmist tells us that before God made the world, God wrapped God's self in a robe of light, a bright talit, light before the dawn of the world, light before the making of the first day, the first ray to split the darkness forever. Like a mother wrapping a newborn, the wings of Shekhinah envelop us, soft as silk, warm as wool, all colors, all together, white light. We will wrap the mitzvot around our frail shoulders against the winds of the world. Touch the tzitzit. Notice the cord that winds around, binding the fringe together. Finger the knots, so we may wrap ourselves and our lives together in wholeness, together in holiness, strengthened in covenant. Touch the tzitzit. Arrayed in the majesty of the holy, we are robed like royalty, tasseled front and back in folds of rich fabric. We are commanded to wear tzitzit so that we will remember and we will act. We are a nation of priests working to mend the world. The psalmist tells us that before God made the world, God wrapped God's self in a robe of light, a bright talit. God has woven me a talit to match. I will wrap myself in mitzvot to do God's work.
Thank you.
In just a minute, we're going to turn to the Micha Mocha on page 64, which is the Jewish freedom song. What I find so fascinating about the Micha Mocha is that it's both a prayer of liminality and a prayer of a moment so concretely defined that it almost screams out to us. It's the moment when the Jewish people are at the edge of crossing the Red Sea, unsure what will happen to the water before their faces and what will happen once they reach the edge of the water. It's the moment when the Jewish people look around and everyone is anxious to take the first step. Midrash teaches that there's some people whose feet linger above the water and contemplate, but no one steps in until Nachshon, the brave leader to take the first step. And Midrash teaches that once Nachshon takes that first step, the water splits open. In our lives, we never know when we need to be the Nachshon or when we need to follow a Nachshon in our midst. In this coming year, let the Micha Mocha teach us that we never know what might happen in the step before us or even 100 steps down the road. That once the Jewish people crossed the Red Sea, freedom didn't come right away. Neither did liberation and justice. But in order for liberation and justice to come, they had to take the first step. Micha Mocha on page 64 invites us to do that. Tehillah L'Olam, Baruch Vara, Moshe Miriam, Uvenei Yisrael, Lahanu Shira, B'Shim Harabah V'Amru Kulam.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, Nora tehilot osef ele נורא תהילות אוסף אלמי, כמוך באלים אדוני מי, כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף אלם, נורא תהילות אוסף אלם.
שירה חדשה, שיפו גאולים השמחה על שפתיים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
Tzur Yisrael, please rise, Kuma Bezrat Yisrael, Uftechi Lumecha, Yehuda veYisrael, Kohaleinu, Adonai Tzivaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael.
Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael.
Amen. Page 66. Yitgadal veYitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Me'alma divrach Yehudeh ve'amlich bachudeh b'chayechon ובيום איכון, ובחיי דכו בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי הבא מברך, לעולם ולעולמי עמיה, יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה, ויתהלל שמי דקודשה, בריחו לאלה ולאלה, מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דאמירן בעמה ואמרו אמן. Hayom Harat Olam. Today is the birthday of the world, the end of 1 year of existence and the beginning of another. And in some ways, we've all shared in this big, massive, life-changing, world-changing experience together, the very same one. But in other ways, our lives have so radically differed over the past year. We lived through different tragedies, different triumphs, different fears, different trials, and we've grown in different directions. We've gotten stuck in different places. So to that end, in this central prayer, the Amidah, the standing prayer, there's space for us to be in our own thoughts and to honor our shared experiences each day, and especially this year, we share the words of our tradition. We'll start together on page 67, and we'll take time later for silent prayer, reading, and reflection. For now, we'll all turn to face the Kotel in Jerusalem, probably east, but because we have a live stream, I don't want to make any assumptions. In the middle, page 67. Anananananana Adonai, Anananananana Sfatai Tiftach, Anananananana Ufi Yagid Tegilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ahei אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לפני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד אתה, מכלכל חיים. בחסד מחיי מתים, ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים, ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים, ומגיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחגה, ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך ברחמים, מי כמוך ברחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים. ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אזיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת שרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, ולנצח נצחים. ועינינו תראינה מלכותך, דבר האמור בשירי עוזך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד גודלך. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. כי אל מלך גדול, גדול וקדוש, גדול וקדוש אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך הגדול.
Amen.
Page 71. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, קודשנו במצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך, צבנו מטובך ושמחנו בשורתך, וטהר ליבנו לעובדך באמת, כי אתה אלוהים אמת ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל, ביום הזיכרון.
Amen.
רצה אדוני אלוהינו, בעמך ישראל, ותפילתם באהבה יקבל, בקבל רצון, בקבל עמך, התקרב לכל קורב פנה, אל עבדיך וחננו, שפוך רוחך עלינו, עלינו. We read together on page 73. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, Modim anachnu lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, Modim anachnu lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, Modim anachnu lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, Modim anachnu lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, Modim anachnu lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, Modim anachnu lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Blessed are you, Eternal One. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Sim, shalom, sim, shalom, sim, shalom, tova uveracha. Sim, shalom, 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 tova uveracha. La 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 la. Sim, shalom, sim, shalom, tova uveracha. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Page 74. בספר חיים ברכה ושלום, פרנסה טובה, ניזכר וניכתב לפניך, אנחנו וכל עמך בית ישראל, לחיים טובים ושלום. ברוך אתה אדוני, עושה השלום.
Amen.
We now move into a period of silence, reflecting on the questions on page 74 and 75, or reading or davening the words on pages 75 through 77, or just exploring what's within us. Continue at your own pace, or join together, bottom of page 77, top of page 78, for Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. You may be seated. ועל כל יושבי תבל, ועמהו אמן. Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'yimhu amen. I'd like to invite Sig Cohen to offer us the Elder's Blessing on page 78. He'll be taking the lead, but if there are any elders here or via live stream who would like to offer the blessing along with him, share a blessing in the live stream chat, just some hopes for the new year, you're welcome to do so.
We've come to the Elder's Blessing on page 79. Perhaps those of you who, like me, are elders in the congregation might put your hands on the shoulders of those younger than you who are sitting near you. Our God and God of our ancestors, grace us with the threefold blessing spoke from the mouth of Aaron and his sons. May this blessing that we bestow upon our children each Shabbat reflect on us all as we say, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka. May God cause a holy light to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasim lecha shalom. May God's face be lifted toward you, and may you be granted peace. Amen.
Yehi ratzon. Yasher koach. So at this time, I'd like to share a special blessing that we make sure to offer every single year on the high holidays. But these are words that we don't typically say for the rest of the year. It's a blessing for a group of people we don't typically specifically acknowledge. And this is a tradition brought to our community by Lori Solnick, for which I am really, really grateful. These people are a part of Havurah because somewhere along the way they happen to fall in love with a Jewish person and make a commitment to them. And that decision has made them an integral part of the Jewish community. I want to tell you, how much you matter to us and how very grateful we are that you are in this with us. You are a diverse group. Some of you are living a full Jewish life. Some of you are devoutly committed to another faith. Some of you don't define yourselves as religious at all. You cover all points along the spectrum, and we acknowledge and respect that diversity. I want to personally thank you for your decision to be present with us in this moment and for the love and devotion that you give to your Jewish partner. And I want to especially thank those of you who are raising your children to know, cherish, and embrace their Jewish heritage. With a history of genocide and persecution and a current reality of shrinking numbers, the Jewish people values your children more than could possibly be articulated. They are our future, and we are eternally grateful for every last one of them. You are the parents who bring your kids to Yavneh Hebrew School, to our Gan Shalom preschool program, and you create Jewish life in your own house. You bring your own loves and skills and values into that Jewish practice. We are enriched by all that you bring. Some of you have paid a significant price for your decision. I hope your children and your partner tell you often of their gratitude and their love. And I'm honored this morning to tell you of the strength and the beauty that you bring to Jewish life. We know how hard you work for this and how much love you throw into it. That work and that love mean the world to this community and to the Jewish people. May the God of all of us spread goodness and blessings upon you all.
Amen.
This summer, I was working at overnight camp when I was in a conversation with a 10-year-old camper. I asked him, "What is God?" And he said, "Well, that's an easy question. Everyone has a special place. My special place is camp. Some people's special place might be their bedroom. Other people, it may be school. And other people, it may be the park. That special place doesn't have to be a home. But the fact that everyone in the world has a special place means that there is a God." Pretty wise words from a 10-year-old. I think a lot about his words. God is a metaphor for what is so hard for us to articulate. Think about all of those emotions. When someone asks you to describe love, we usually say, "Well, feels good," or we use some form of a metaphor. When someone asks you to describe a delicious meal at that incredible restaurant, we use metaphors because the feeling of taste is so difficult to articulate. That is God. God is this entity that we use as a tool to express what can't be described. In a minute, we will be turning to the Avinu Malkeinu on page 79. Here, the metaphor that the liturgy uses is a father or a king. But what metaphor do you need in this moment? Do you need a God who's a mother? Do you need a God who's a friend? Do you need a God who manifests within a tree? Or do you need a God who is silently below your feet, guiding your steps? An invitation to think about who, what, and where that God is that allows you to feel connected in a way that allows God to hold you and wherever you may be in this moment. Please rise if you're able, and we'll turn to Avinu Malkeinu on page 79.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'aneinu, ki en banu ma'asim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu tzedakah v'chesed v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'aneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu v'aneinu, ki ein banu ma'asim.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu lefanecha.
Source of life, sovereign of the universe, we have done wrong in your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, ein lanu melech ela ata.
Our source, our sovereign, we have no one to rule over us but you.
Avinu Malkeinu, aseh imanu leman shemecha.
Our source, our sovereign, help us for the honor of your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, chadesh aleinu shana tova.
Our source, our sovereign, renew us for a good year.
Avinu Malkeinu, hafer atzat oivenu.
Our source, our sovereign, nullify the plans of any who may seek to do us harm.
Avinu Malkeinu, salach u'machal chol avonotenu.
Our source, our sovereign, grant forgiveness and atonement for all of our transgressions.
Avinu Malkeinu, hachazirenu b'tshuva shlema lefanecha.
Our source, our sovereign, help us to return wholeheartedly into your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, shalach refuah shlema lecholim.
Our source, our sovereign, send complete healing to all who are ill.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer chayim tovim.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us for good fortune in the book of life.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer geula v'yeshua.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of redemption and salvation.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer parnasa v'chalkala.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of sustenance and livelihood.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer zechuyot.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of merit.
Avinu Malkeinu, katvenu b'sefer slicha u'mechukila.
Our source, our sovereign, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness and atonement.
Avinu Malkeinu, chatzmach lanu Yeshua b'karov.
Our source, our sovereign, let grow for us the tree of imminent redemption.
Avinu Malkeinu, zachar ki afar anachnu.
Our source, our sovereign, remember us though we are made of dust.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamal aleinu v'al ol aleinu v'tapeinu.
Our source, our sovereign, be merciful to us and to all of our offspring.
Avinu malkeinu, aseh laman harugim al shem kodshecha.
Our source, our sovereign, act in memory of all who have been killed while honoring your name.
Avinu malkeinu, aseh laman shimcha hagadol hagibor v'hanora shenikra aleinu.
Our source, our sovereign, act in honor of your great and mighty awe-inspiring name, which has been called out over us for our protection.
Avinu malkeinu, chanenu v'aneinu. Avinu malkeinu, chanenu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed. Aseh imanu, tzedakah v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu malkeinu, chanenu v'aneinu. Avinu malkeinu, chanenu v'aneinu, ki ein banu masim.
Please remain standing. We'll begin our Torah service actually on page 83 with the ark open, weirdly, but we can close it for a second while Dan comes up. Dan Gordon will be leading us in our Torah service. You might have noticed a couple pieces of the service are different because there's such a major live stream component in our community. So Dan, you're welcome to, it is over here on page 83.
Vayehi binso Aharon, vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, ki mitzion tetzei Torah. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Adonai mirushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah Torah, le'amo Yisrael, B'kedushato. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed B'Emet, Notzer Chesed Le'alafim, Nosei Avon Ba'fesha, V'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed Le'alafim, Nosei Avon Ba'fesha, V'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer chesed le'alafim, nose avon ba'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Vani tefilati, tefilati, lecha Adonai, et ratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, aneni, aneni, be'emet yishecha. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Adlu Adonai iti, uniromima Shemo yachtav.
And I'd like to invite our Gan Shalom students who are virtually present with us today to accompany us with our Torah Processional.
Lecha Adonai hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferet lehanetza v'hahor ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'va'aretz cha Adonai hamamlacha Yamit Naseh Lechol Rosh Romimu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu L'Adom Raglav Kadoshu Romimu Adonai Eloheinu Ve'ishtachavu lehar kadsho ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Shaklach, you may be seated. All right, so for each of our Aliyot this morning, I'm honored to call up a different group of people for the Aliyah, but I can't call you up physically for the purposes of social distancing and because we've got our live stream going. And so if or when an Aliyah applies to you, and we'll be doing more of this on Yom Kippur, so if nothing applies to you this morning, something likely will then. You are welcome to rise in your seat and chant the blessing along with the representative who's called up virtually or otherwise. You're welcome to say something in the live chat. Just say like, hey, that's me. Say your name. Give us some details if you like. It's totally up to you. And I'll be offering a blessing to each group of folks taking that Aliyah after the reading. But our first Torah reading can be found on pages 86 and 87. It's a combination of what's labeled as the first and second Aliyot, but for us, this is just one Aliyah. Genesis 21, verses 1 through 12. These verses will be chanted by David Hexter. Thank you. And this Aliyah is for all families who welcomed a new child or grandchild this past year. So if that's you, and it is also me, go ahead and comment on the live stream, rise in your place, and in just a moment, I'll invite the representatives for this group, Tracy Nagelbush and Jerry Tolk, to lead us in offering the blessing for this first Aliyah. יעמדו כל העולים והעולים זקנים החדשים בשנה העברה לשנה העלייה הראשונה.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר ברא בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. אמן.
Amen. Vadonai pakadet saraka asher amar vayas Adonai l'saraka asher diber v'tahar vateled Sarah le'Avraham ben lizkunav Lamoed asher diber oto Elohim vayikra Avraham et shem beno hanolad lo asher yalda lo Sarah Yitzchak vayamal Avraham et Yitzchak beno ben shmonat yamim Ka'asher tzivah Elohim va'Avraham ben ma'at shana bivaled lo et Yitzchak beno va'tomer Sarah tzechok asali Elohim kol hashomea Yitzchak li Vatomer mi leol Avraham Eini kavanim Sarah ki aldati ben lizkunav vayigdal hayeled vayigamal vayas Avraham nishte gadol Beyom higamel et Yitzchak, vatera Sarah et ben Hagar hamitzrit, asher yalda la'Avraham yitzachek, vatomer la'Avraham garesh, hama hazot bi'et bina, Ki lo yirash ben hama hazot im bani im Yitzchak vayera hadavar ma'od be'enei Avraham al odot beno vayomer Elohim el Avraham Al yera beinecha al hanar v'alamatecha kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shema bekola ki v'yitzchak yikarei lecha Zara.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah.
Amen. Shukach, David. Mi sheberach avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov ve'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless these parents and grandparents of new babies born in just this past year with mindfulness, with the ability to remember in all the ways that this is hopeful and in all the ways that this is painful. Gam ze ya'avor, this too shall pass. Bless them, me too, with gratitude for every precious moment, with a sense of humor during the hard times. May we grow with our babies in love, strength, and wisdom. And let us say, Amen. Our second Torah reading is found on page 80, and it's labeled number 3. It's Genesis chapter 21, verses 13 through 21. And this one will be chanted by Lou Perwin. And this Aliyah is for everyone who became a B'nai Mitzvah in the past year, or whose children will become B'nai Mitzvah in the coming year. So if that's you, go ahead and comment in the live stream, rise where you are, chant along with the blessing. And I'd like to invite the representatives for this group to, I'd like to invite the representatives for this group to lead us. They will be Theo Weller, Willa Marks, Tali Pressman, Maddie Hurwitz, and Maccabee Epstein. יעמדו כל המשפחות בני מצווה לעלייה השנית.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
Amen. וגם את בן האמה לגוי אשימנו, כי זרעך הוא, וישכן אברהם בבוקר, ויקח לחם וחמת מים, ויתן אל הגר, שם על שכמה, ואת הילד וישלחך, ותלך ותטע במדבר באר שבע. ויכלו המים מן החמת, ואת הילד, את הילד החט תחת אחד השיחים, ותלך ותטע לה מנגד, הרחק כמתחווה קשת, כי אמרה אל אראה במות היילוד, ותשב מנגד, ותישא את קולה, ותבך, וישמע אלוהים את קול הנער, ויקרא מלאך אלוהים אל הגר מן השמיים, ויאמר לה מלאך הגר, אל תיראי, כי שמע אלוהים אל קול הנער, באשר הוא שם. קומי, שאי את הנער, והחזיכי את ידך בו, כי לגוי גדול אשימנו, ויפקח אלוהים את עיניך, ותראה באר מים, ותלך ותמלא את החמת מים, ותשק את הנער. ויהי אלוהים את הנער, ויגדל, וישב במדבר, ויהי רובה קשה. וישב במדבר פרן, ותיקח לו אמו עיסא מארץ מצרים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. יישר כוח. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואימותינו שרה רבקה רחל ולאה. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless these new B'nai Mitzvah and parents of B'nai Mitzvah to be. with a deep sense of accomplishment in having reached this new stage, a time of reflecting on what our tradition means to us and sharing that meaning with the people we love. Bless them with community and with joy. And let us say, Amen. Our third Torah reading is on pages 88 and 89, and it's labeled Numbers 4 and 5. It's Genesis chapter 1, verses 22 through 34. This one will be chanted by Michael Allen, and this Aliyah is for both couples who were married or celebrated a significant anniversary in the past year, or individuals who experienced their own significant anniversary in the past year. And so if that's you, go ahead and comment in the live stream. Let us know your situation, or rise where you are and chant along with Aliyah. I'm happy to welcome up Leslie to join Michael for this Aliyah because they just celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Mazal tov. יעמדו כל שהתחתנו ושיקנגו יום שנה גדולה בשנה העברה לעלייה השלישית.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayehi ba'et hahi, vayomer Avimelech, Ufichol sartavo el Avraham lemor Elohim imacha v'chol asher ata oseh v'ata hishava li v'Elohim heina im tishkor li ulmini ulnechti chachesed asher siti imcha taseh imadi v'im haaretz asher garta ba Vayomer Avraham Anochi Shovea Vahochiach Avraham et Avimelech Alodot Be'er Hamayim Asher Gazlu Avdei Avimelech Vayomer Avimelech Lo Yadati Mi Asa et Hadavor Hazeh V'gam ata Lo Higarta Li V'gam Anochi Lo shamati bilti hayom. Vayikach Avraham tzon uvakor, vayitein lavimelech, vayichurtu shnehem berit, vayatsev Avraham et sheva, kivsot hatzon levadhen, vayover Avimelech el Avraham, mahena, sheva kvasot ha'eleh, Asher hitzafta levadana, vayomer ki et sheva kavasot tikach miadi, bavur ti'ali leida, ki chafarti et haber hazot, hakein kara lamakom hahu be'ershava, ki sham nishbu shnehem, Vayichristu berit b'Beersheva, vayakam Avimelech, ufichol sartavo, vayashuvu el eretz plishtim, vayita'esh el b'Beersheva, vayikra sham b'shem Adonai el olam, vayagor Avraham, beretz plishtim, yamim rabim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואימותינו שרה רבקה רחל ולאה. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless these dedicated individuals in the community who have made in love and in work and in passion various commitments and kept them for significant periods of time. May you continue to nurture those commitments with love and with compassion for yourselves and for the objects of your love, the objects of your devotion, and may you receive love and compassion in return. And let us say, Amen. יישר כוח.
We now turn to the point in our service when we offer a prayer for healing, both of mind, of body, of spirit, noting that mental health is just as important as physical and spiritual health. If there's a name of someone, or perhaps yourself, that is in need of healing in this moment, we invite you to either stand if you're able, or share their name from your seat or on the live stream so that we can collectively lift that person up or lift you up together. We'll sing the Mishaberach on page 89, but first I invite if anyone wants to stand up and share. As I move my hand around.
Janet McCain. And all those be named silently. Mishaberach avotenu mikol habracha la'imotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach imotenu mikol habracha avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. This time, I'd like to call up our first Magbia and our first Golalot, the people who will be lifting and dressing our first Torah scroll, Sheldon Harris and Liz Pelsiger and Tilly Mott. Ya'amdu ha-Magbia v'ha-Golalot. Turn to page 91 and be prepared to rise as the Torah is lifted. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai ve'ad Moshe Torah. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Hey, nay, nay, hey, nay, hey, nay, 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 nay. Hey, nay, nay, hey, nay, hey, nay, hey, nay, 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 nay. Hey, nay, nay. Hey, nay, 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 hey, nay, nay. Hey, nay. Asher koach. When the Torah is resting against Sheldon's chest, we can all have a seat. Do you want your kippah back? Thank you, Sheldon. Asher koach, Liz and Tilly. You're going to be seated. So for the Maftyr Aliyah, we'll welcome Dan Gordon back up to the bima to chant Numbers 29, verses 1 through 6, right at the bottom of page 91. And this Aliyah is for new members of the Havurah. So welcome. And by new, we mean like new and new-ish. So I think really if you became a part of the Havurah, since the pandemic struck, like you count as kind of new because we haven't had that many times to see each other in person. Go ahead and rise and join in if you like for the Aliyah. Comment on the live stream. Say who you are. And I'd like to invite the representatives for this group. In just a moment. We'll wait till the second Torah scroll is ready. But I'll invite the representatives of this group, Kim Fellner and Alec Dubrow, to lead us in the Aliyah blessing for the Maftyr Aliyah. יעמדו כל החברים החדשים של Havurah לעלייה מפתירה.
Lashana Tova. I'm Kim Fellner. I'm honored to offer this Aliyah on behalf of my husband Alec Dubrow and all the newish members of the congregation. If you are newer to the Havurah, I invite you to chant along with me. Baruch et Adonai Hamavara. Congregation's turn.
Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamavarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Uvachodesh hashvihi bechad lachodesh mikra kodesh yeh lahem kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu yom teruah yeh lahem ba'asitem olah l'reach nichoach l'Adonai Par ben bakar, echad ayil echad, kivasim b'nei shana, shivat temimim. Umin chatam, Solet belulat bashamen, Shlosha esronim la par, Shnei esronim la ayil. Va'isaron echad, la keves ha'echad, Lishivat hakvasim. Usirizim echad chatat, Lechaper alehem. Milebad, Olat hachodesh, Uminchata, Violat hatamid, Uminchata, Venizkehem kemishbatam, L'reach nichoach, Isha l'Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Shekoach. Mishaberach avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov ve'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all the new members of our community with a sense of family and a sense of home. May they find their people here and feel loved for who they are. May they use their unique skills to help build the community and work together with all of us to support one another and to repair the world. And let us say, Amen. So now I'd like to invite up to the Bima our Magbiha and Golalim for our second stroll. Bryn Epstein, Jane Lang, and Robert Kapp. Ya'amdu ha-Magbiha v'ha-Golalim. We'll prepare to rise as the Torah is lifted in the middle of page 92. Fair enough, Sheldon. Vezot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai Ve'ad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Yanai, nai, 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 nai. Yanai, nai, 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 nai. Yanai, nai, yanai, 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 nai. Yanai, yanai, nai. Yanai, nai, 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 nai. Hey, nay, 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 nay. Hey, nay, 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 nay. Hey, nay, 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 nay. Hey, nay, nay, hey, nay, nay, nay. Hey, nay, 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 nay. Yasher, Koach, Bryn, Jane, and Robert, you may be seated.
Shana Tova. For those of you who I haven't had a lot of time to talk to yet, I often share that growing up, I had two religions: the Judaism of my family and the religion of baseball of my city. My first conscious spiritual experience took place when I was 9 years old. My mom and I were sitting together at Wrigley Field, home of the Chicago Cubs baseball team. As the Cubs were 5 outs away from reaching the World Series, she turned to me and said, "Jenna, you're too young to understand, but you're about to witness history." In that moment, there was an unexpected fan interference that led the Cubs to blow the game, the series, and eventually their chance at making it to the coveted World Series. As the stadium fluctuated between angry boos and piercing silence, I looked around and saw people unapologetically crying and holding strangers. I felt such an indescribable sense of interconnectedness and divinity in the shared disappointment and devastation of my fellow Cubs fans. In that moment, baseball was teaching me how to grieve. I learned how to grieve not from the loss of a loved one or the news or the books I read in school, but from baseball. I had to learn this from baseball because our society is terrible at grief and loss. We run away from these conversations and use euphemisms to talk about death and suffering. We continue with the narrative of time will make it better, or just go back to work and everything will be okay. We find it easier to push away and pretend that the loss isn't there than to be vulnerable and lean on others. We fear not only the loss itself, but seeming like a burden or inconveniencing others by taking the time to grieve. But how are we supposed to just move on when we experience incomprehensible loss? How are we supposed to rebuild when there is still a giant gaping hole in our foundation? Rabbi Earl Grolman teaches that grief is not a disorder, a disease, or a sign of weakness. It is an emotional, physical, and spiritual necessity. It is the price we pay for love. The only cure for grief is to grieve. This summer, the Cubs traded the entire team that was fundamental to their World Series core in 2016, seemingly overnight. At the beginning of June, the Cubs were one of the best teams in baseball, and by the end of July, they had no players left and were described as one of the worst teams in Cubs history. When asked about his decision, the Cubs general manager said, "I know it isn't the easiest emotional decision, but it was the best financial one." After this series of trades, I found myself shattered. I would sit hysterically crying and watch videos of these players crying in the dugout as they learned that they would no longer be players for the Cubs. I found myself unable to watch the games. It was too hard. The pain was too real. And I wasn't able to continue cheering for my team while I was riddled in the grief by their choices. It may feel ludicrous to talk about grief in trading baseball players when we are still living through the reality of a global pandemic and there is so much loss around us. But grief is multidimensional. Grief is not a zero-sum game. The fascinating thing about grief is that it is a complex emotion that lives in all forms of loss. Sometimes one form of loss can trigger grief from another unresolved form of loss. We feel this when we watch a sad movie and suddenly find ourselves crying about an old breakup, or when the death of a friend's loved one triggers our own anticipatory grief for the potential loss of people in our life. There has been so much loss over the past year and a half, from canceled vacations to loss of jobs to loss of control, security, or even life. The amount of loss can sometimes seem unfathomable and overwhelming. My friend Frankie Sandmel wrote, "We are all grieving. We grieve over the brokenness of the world as climate change endangers all of our futures, as refugees and asylum seekers desperately seek safety, as poverty and hunger increases, as people of color are threatened by violence, and as too many live without basic freedoms. We grieve over personal losses, the death of loved ones, our own loss of safety and security in the face of a global pandemic, loss of jobs and economic security, and the loss of the old normal as our everyday lives change drastically. In the midst of the large-scale grief of the world, some of us may feel that our personal losses are not worthy of attention, but our personal grief over the small and large losses in our life are just as real and just as deserving of mourning. The COVID-19 pandemic has compounded into a grief crisis. As the pandemic continues, it's ignited a long overdue conversation on grief. We're in a society in which the grind relies on a foundation of bouncing back, productivity, self-reliance, and resilience. How does one learn how to grieve? At our family Seder this year, I so desperately wanted to just be joyful at being able to gather together in person. But what I felt was overstimulation. I was so overwhelmed by the amount of conversation and people that all I wanted to do was sit in a room in silence. And this was my family, my closest people. And I was still completely overwhelmed. In retrospect, I can't blame myself for feeling something beyond unbridled joy in that space. There was a part of me that wasn't ready. We aren't ready to go back to a pre-pandemic reality because we haven't grieved first. We haven't grieved the immense loss of life. We haven't even grieved the small things, like lost ice cream samples, or that weird half smile you give people when you see them walking down the street. There's been no space for the way that we both personally and societally have lost and changed. So what does it mean to hold the grief and pain while trying to step into the reality of the world? Is it even possible to go back to normal while holding the ways that everyone has changed and is now just a little more broken? Jewish tradition provides us with a beautiful framework and models to us how to think about how to begin to answer this question. In 70 CE, when the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple and center of all Jewish living, was destroyed, Jewish life and community was literally left in ruins. The Jewish people were destroyed and devastated in this catastrophe. They witnessed profound death and destruction and were thrown into a deep state of uncertainty. Their home base, the base where they were Jews, was destroyed. Before even thinking about rebuilding, what did the survivors do in the face of all of this destruction? The Midrash teaches that they tore their clothes. They cried, they screamed, and they lamented. They mourned for the destruction for those who lost their lives and for future generations. They mourned out of fear for the future and for the loss that they saw before their own eyes. They held on to everything that they could remember, from the most sacred stories to the most mundane details. Talmud teaches us that even God cried. Rabbinic literature recounting this time period teaches us that a healthy society must grieve. And in fact, a healthy society can't even comprehend rebuilding before it can grieve. Like with a broken bone, until you examine it, X-ray it, look at its details, put it in a cast, it cannot heal. Perhaps what allowed the rabbis to reinvent Judaism after the destruction of the temple was that they both separated themselves from the loss and they embraced it. They cried out and despaired and wallowed. And then they looked at what remained and asked themselves, what can we do with these remaining pieces? What bones can we heal? Only after the intentional process of grieving were the rabbis able to move on and write the oral Torah, what is now what we use as the framework for Jewish practice. This summer, after the Cubs traded basically their entire team, there was an article entitled, "The Cubs Need a New Kind of Rebuild," that was published on a fan's blog. It argued that the psyche of Cubs fans was too vulnerable to have continuous bad seasons. They said that the team couldn't go from one of the best to one of the worst teams overnight, and that they needed to imagine what rebuilding the team would look like in the context of holding the fans' emotions. The author argued that in order to keep fans in an okay place, the Cubs needed a different kind of rebuild. So after a year and a half of tremendous loss, what about us? Have we grieved? Have we allowed ourselves to lean into the ways in which we've experienced tremendous personal and collective loss over the past year and a half? Have we let ourselves say, yes, some opportunities are coming back, but we are not okay? We have to remind ourselves that it's okay to not be okay, that grief is a slow, nonlinear process, and that saying we are not okay is the holiest thing that we can do. Our flaws are a part of the collective experience that we are all going through. We can respond to the question of, how are you, with something other than great, good, or fine. After the temple was destroyed, the rabbis literally built grief practices into their structures. In the post-temple period, Beit Midrash, houses of study, were built with multiple entrances. Rabbi Sharon Brous explains that one person enters, one person who is experiencing something awful. The text says that person enters from the same doorway, but they start to circle in the opposite direction. Every step against the grain, and every single person who passes that person is obligated to stop and ask, Malacha, what's going on with you? And the person, surrounded by people and yet totally alone, has to answer. My mother died. Made it 2 years longer than anyone expected, but the cancer was just too aggressive. Another follows behind, a moment later, also walking against the masses of humanity. I lost my sister, she says, my best friend in the world. Nobody ever understood me like she did. Nobody ever will. My father is in hospice, says the next. I just want him to be able to live his final days in dignity and without suffering. My college roommate took his life, the next says. I had no idea he was in so much pain. And those who walk from right to left, and every single one of them must stop. They must make sure that the mourners and the sick and the brokenhearted are all seen. May God bring you comfort, they say. May you feel the presence of this holy community and know that you are not alone. The point was to see people in their grief and make their grief visible. They needed to alter their routine to be seen in their grief. The very entrances they walked into had to shift, an interruption in the patterns of their daily lives. The people who were grieving couldn't go back to normal, or at least couldn't go back to normal without some element of separation to draw attention to what is different about them. This reminded them in the community that even as the world, the learning and the Beit Midrash continues on, life goes on, that person's life is still altered dramatically and still has an open wound of grief. The model of the 10 days, the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, is actually a really beautiful model for what it means in this moment to think about rebuilding. That there is so much brokenness and instability and pain that before we think about going back, we have to lean into the emotional toll that the last year and a half has taken. There is something really powerful and countercultural about the fact that when we start a new year and dream about creating on Rosh Hashanah, but then spend 10 days going back and reflecting before we really start the process of starting anew in the new year. Looking back inwards and looking out. Perhaps it is a model for a societal and personal new kind of rebuild. What was missing from my grief around the Cubs story is that 2 weeks before the Cubs traded their entire team, my grandfather passed away. He was one of the most honorable, humble, and loving people I've ever met. But I never cried about his death. This is not for a lack of love or sadness. It's that I couldn't. We never know where our grief may live or manifest. It can show up in the most expected or unexpected places. There is no right way to grieve or right place to grieve. On the surface, I was crying over baseball. But I think in my tears for the Cubs, what I was accessing is the multifaceted and complex grief of the last year and a half and my grandfather's death. The Jewish people's response after the Beit Midrash is a really beautiful example of why grief before action matters. Grief gives us the tools to take a step back so that we're not acting in pain. Rather, we're acting out of a place of brokenness when we are ready. Annie Lamott teaches that you will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up, and you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with the limp. Where are the areas that you are able to experience grief and express emotions? Where are the places and who are the people that let you be vulnerable? Because a new world is possible if we allow ourselves to create sanctuaries of hope, love, and redemption in the brokenness of our hearts. As we enter into the new year and these 10 days of awe, may we imagine what we need to enter into the breakage of our hearts and see what is living there. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova and Yasher Koach. So for those of you who weren't around at the very beginning of the service, I introduced student rabbi Jenna Shah in their penultimate year at Hebrew College, brought in by the Havurah to share the high holidays with us as I was coming back from leave just 3 weeks ago. And I feel so lucky that we found them, that they found us. And especially during such a wild time in the world and in our community, it feels really, really good to have a fresh voice and some fresh Torah. So thank you for sharing it. I'll be speaking on Kol Nidre and on Ne'ilah, but don't worry, Jenna will be back sharing the Bima with Michael and with myself. In just a moment, we'll be hearing the words of Chana, our Rosh Hashanah Haftarah. And we'll find Chana in an incredibly dark moment, a moment of grief, devastated after having struggled with years for infertility. So many of us and our dear ones know that struggle or a variation of it all too well. And weeping, Chana came to a sacred space and poured out her heart. And she did so in a way, she was so beside herself that she seemed drunk. For those among us who know, as Jenna put it, like these different kinds of grief. For Chana, the grief of infertility, but there are so many different kinds. This Haftarah reminds us, as Jenna said, that it's okay to break down, it's okay to express that, and it's okay to express it in ways that might even seem transgressive. Chana was she was even berated for a moment by Eli, but she did what she needed to do, and in the end, as we'll see in our Haftarah, he welcomed her with all that she was bringing. It's a message for those of us who have experienced grief and for those of us, all of us, who will. So I'd like to welcome Tali Pressman up to the Bima to chant our Haftarah. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 9 through 20. You'll find the blessing before the Haftarah on page 98, but you'll find that reading of breaking down in a healing and holy way on page 100.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nbi'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nbi'ei ha'emet v'atzedek. V'takam Chana acharei achla v'shilo v'acharei shato v'Eli hakohen yoshev ha'kisei al mezuzot heichal Adonai v'hi marat nafesh v'tipalel al Adonai uvachal tivkeh v'tidor neder v'tomar Adonai tziva'ot imra'o tireh ba'ani amatecha uzchartani v'lo tishkach et amatecha v'natata la'amatecha zera anashim untativ l'Adonai kol yamei chayam umara lo ya'aleh al rosho v'haya ki hirbta l'hipalel lifnei Adonai ve'eli shomer epiha v'chana hi medaberet aliba rak zivateha na'ot v'kola lo yishameya v'yachshaveh Eli l'shikora v'yomer elecha Eli ad matai tishtakariv hasiri et yenech me'alayich v'ta'an Chana v'tomer lo Adoni isha kishat ruach anachi v'yayin v'shekor lo shatiti v'eshpoch et nafshi lifnei Adonai ol titein amatecha lifnei bapaliyah ki merov sichi v'chasi dibarti adhena v'ya'an Eli v'yomer l'chi l'shalom v'Elohei Yisrael yitain et shelatech asher sha'al me'imo v'tomer timtza shivchatecha chen v'einecha v'telet ha'isha l'darka v'tochal ufaneha lo hayu lo od v'yashkimu b'boker v'yishtakavu lifnei Adonai v'yashuvu v'yavo'u el beitam haramata v'yada el kana et chana ishto v'yizkareha Adonai v'yahi l'hikufot hayamim v'ytahar Chana v'ytelet ben v'ytikra et shemo Shemuel ki me Adonai sheyiltiv Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam tzor kol ha'olamim tzadik b'chol hadarot hayel ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'oseh hamdaber u'mkayem shekol devarav emet batzedek, al haTorah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al hami'im ve'al yom hazikaron hazeh, shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu l'chavod ultifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu, anachnu modim lach umvarchim otach, yiparach shimcha b'fi Kohai tamid le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh Yisrael Yom Zikaron.
Amen. Yasher Koach. That was beautiful. So on pages 104 and 105, we will find our blessings for our country and for Israel. And we'll be offering one on Rosh Hashanah and the other on Yom Kippur this year. So for now, I'd like to welcome Ryan Bergamini to lead us on page 104 in a prayer for our country.
Our God and God of our ancestors, bless this country and all who dwell within it. Help us to experience the blessings of our lives and circumstances. Help us to be vigilant, compassionate, and brave. Strengthen us when we are afraid. Help us to channel our anger so that it motivates us to action. Help us to feel our fear so that we do not become numb. Help us to be generous with others so that we raise each other up. Help us to be humble in our fear, knowing that as vulnerable as we feel, there are those at greater risk, and that it is our holy work to stand with them. Help us to taste the sweetness of liberty, to not take for granted the freedoms won in generations past or in recent days, to heal and nourish our democracy, that it may be like a tree planted by the water, whose roots reach down to the stream. It need not fear drought when it comes. Its leaves are always green. Source of all life, guide our leaders with righteousness. Strengthen their hearts, but keep them from hardening, that they may use their influence and authority to speak truth and act for justice. May all who dwell in this country share in its bounty, enjoy its freedoms, and be protected by its laws. May this nation use its power and wealth to be a voice for justice, peace, and equality for all who dwell on earth. May we be strong and have courage to be bold in our action and deep in our compassion, to discern when we must listen and when we must act, to uproot bigotry, intolerance, misogyny, racism, discrimination, and violence in all its forms, to celebrate the many faces of God reflected in the wondrous diversity of humanity, to welcome the stranger and the immigrant, and to honor the gifts of those who seek refuge and possibility here, as they have since before this nation was born. Let justice well up like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Amen. Yasher Koach, Ryan. Let's turn to page 106. And as we prepare for our shofar service, I'd like to invite Alan, our executive director, and Gila Schusterman to offer a poem by Devin Speer.
It is a wonder the shofar is shaped like the inside of an ear.
Because at the moment we are blasted with sound.
And our whole world becomes the ancient voice, longing, calling, demanding.
We are meant to listen to whom is below noise.
And there, underneath the usual commands and allegiances,
is Torah, listening and weeping in all the invisible eternal ink.
Shekach. So to keep us safe this year, our shofar calls are happening virtually, but the message is the same. It's my honor to invite Maccabee Epstein and Aaron and Joey Hiller to lead us in our shofar service.
In ancient Israel, the sound of the ram's horn announced a new month, a jubilee year, the coronation of a king, and all the solemn and festive moments a community shared. But when the new moon of the 7th month appeared, deeper meanings awakened within the hearts of our ancestors. Read with me. Wake up, cries the shofar, and we are sad. We remember the errors of our past year. Wake up, cries the shofar, and we are joyous. We remember that a year of new beginnings is upon us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, there shall be a sacred assembly, a cessation from work, a day of commemoration proclaimed by the sound of the shofar. Hear now the shofar. Tekiah, shavarim, Truah, Tekiah. Awaken from your slumbers, you who have fallen asleep in life, and reflect on your deeds. Remember your God. Do not miss reality in pursuit of shadows. Do not waste years in vain pursuits. Look well into yourselves. Let there be improvement in your acts. Let us give heed to the sound of the shofar and be mindful of its message. It heralds the new year and the opportunity for new beginnings. It summons us to render our wholehearted efforts toward tshuva, turning, so that we may better ourselves, our people, and the world in which we live. Tekiah, shavarim, Tekiah. Let us give heed to the sound of the shofar and be mindful of its message. It is a reminder that we are each other's keepers. May it awaken us to take responsibility for any ills we bring upon one another and any harm we cast onto the earth we inhabit. Tekiah, Truah, Tekiah. Let us give heed to the sound of the shofar and be mindful of its message. May we be inspired by the call of the shofar to walk in the light of your presence. Tekiah, Truah, Tekiah Gedolah.
Shakoach. Let's turn to page 109 and prepare to return the Torah scrolls to the ark. Please rise. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado, hodo al eretz v'shamayim, ve'arem keren le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Etz chaim hi, lama chazikim ba, v'tzom cheha me'ushar. דרכיה דרכי נועם וכל נתיבותיה שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה. חדש, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. Yasher Koach, and please be seated. Page 110.
Those of us in the congregation who are aged, infirm, or seriously ill, and who have faced our demise as a likely near-term event, look at the Unatana Tokef prayer with a different perspective. We know that this prayer, with its familiar and haunting melody, is a central feature of the High Holiday liturgy. We know that the call for teshuvah, repentance, tefillah, prayer, and tzedakah, generosity toward others, is the core calling of these holy days. We know that this ancient prayer is designed to capture our full attention by reminding us of our mortality and the need to live a life of Torah filled with acts of loving kindness and humility in recognition of the eternal holiness that is a part of all living creatures. But we also know that death is simply the end of a process that begins at birth. When we celebrate a birth, we pray that the infant shall live a long and righteous and joyful life. But we know that the longest, most righteous, and most joyful life must end in death. Death is not a punishment for wrongdoing. We may celebrate a person's birth and mourn her death, but we know the beginning of the process and the end of the process are part of the continuity of life itself. And so we participate in this liturgy on this holy day in gratitude for being part of the life process that continues forever and ever. We are part of the design of the Creator on this day and on every day without measure. We pledge ourselves to teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah until our death in loving gratitude for that gift.
Please rise as you're able as the ark is once again opened. ונתן את תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא והיום, ובו תנשא מלכותך, וייכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת. Page 111. Join with us towards the middle of the page. Kevakorat, kevakorat, kevakorat. Kevakorat, kevakorat, rohedro, mavir tzonot tachat shivto. 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 Kevakorat, kevakorat, kevakorat.
We live in a world of binaries. God has many names, and these many names are an attempt to fully express the manifestation of God, in which the true Yud-He, Vav-He is able to come to the surface. Yet our yearning to call out God's true name exists as a result of the distinction between us and God. Being able to say that word, Yud-He, Vav-He, could be the very thing that brings about Olam Haba, the sages teach, the world to come. I can't help but think about this in the context of coming out in giving ourselves our own names and our identities. Perhaps as we're grappling with our own identities and thinking through what it looks like to come out as our truest selves, perhaps saying our own names and saying our true identities allows the godliness within us to come to the surface. And it is almost as if we are saying our own personal Yud He Vav He. In a second, we're going to turn to God's 13 attributes, the moment when we express the multifaceted elements of God, the intersectionality of God's identity. In Breshit, the world is created by God, it teaches, but the world existed before Breshit. Things just were given names in Breshit. So, as we turn to these 13 attributes, an invitation to think about what we need to say aloud to make them real. Page 111. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Chapayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, V'Chatat V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Chapayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, V'Chatat V'Nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Chapayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Noseh Chesed L'Alafim, Noseh Avon V'Fesha, V'Chatat V'Nakeh. Page 112. Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, Uyom Tzom Kippur Yechatemun. Rosh Hashanah Yikatevun, Uyom Tzom Kippur Yechatemun. It is said that we die and are reborn several times in a lifetime. What has died within us this past year? What will be birthed from us in the coming year? Together, how many shall pass on? How many shall be born? Who shall live and who shall die? Who shall see a ripe old age and who shall not? Who shall perish by fire and who by water? Who by sword and who by beast? Who by hunger and who by thirst? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who shall be secure and who shall be driven? Who shall be tranquil and who shall be troubled? Who shall be poor and who shall be rich? Who shall be humbled and who shall be exalted? These words inspire terror. But rather than offering an inventory of how we shall die, may these words challenge us to examine how we live. Prayer is poetry, our long tradition of examination, and our call to tshuva, to return to turning, requires us to probe deeply in order to truly understand the meaning of these words. When we really begin a new year, it is decided. And when we actually repent, it is determined. Who shall be truly alive and who shall merely exist? Who shall be happy and who shall be miserable? Who shall be tormented by the fire of ambition? And whose hopes shall be quenched by the waters of failure? Who shall be pierced by the sharp sword of envy? And who shall be torn by the wild beast of resentment? Who shall hunger for companionship? And who shall thirst for approval?
Who shall be shattered by the storms of change? And who shall be stressed by the pressures of conformity? Who shall be strangled by insecurity? And who shall be beaten into submission? Who shall be content with their lot? And who shall wander in search of satisfaction? Who shall be serene? And who shall be distraught? Who shall be at ease? And who shall be afflicted with anxiety? Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, Uyom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, Uyom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. Please be seated.
During this high holiday season, we are specially assigned the responsibility to attend to the needs of those less fortunate than ourselves. And so, as we wonder who will live and who will die in the coming year, contemplating the extent to which our fate lies in God's hands, we remember the ways in which we as humans are responsible for the lives of one another. Who does our society take care of, and who does it leave behind? Who do we nourish, and who do we neglect? Who is exposed to violence, and who lives in security? Who yearns for fresh air, and who breathes it daily? So it is written. Must it so be sealed?
So with Aleinu, on page 114, particularly on Rosh Hashanah, we approach as subjects, approaching a sovereign. And you can rise now, but it's going to be just a moment, because there's something new that we're doing just beforehand. Although if it's your custom to kneel down to the ground for the Grand Aleinu, you might want to find a space in an aisle the next few moments. So we're approaching our sovereign, looking for challenge, and this year, my understanding, I don't think I'm assuming when I say that many of us feel challenged enough as it is already. And I came across this poem by John Rodell that imagines a conversation between us and God at a time maybe like this year. So as we approach our sovereign, maybe this is the conversation we might imagine having. The poem is a very brief play. I will play us, Jenna will play God. Hey, God.
Hello.
I'm falling apart. Can you put me back together?
I would rather not.
Why?
Because you aren't a puzzle.
What about all the pieces of my life that are falling down to the ground?
Let them stay there for a while. They fell off for a reason. Take some time and decide if you need any of those pieces back.
You don't understand. I'm breaking down.
No, you don't understand. You are breaking through. What you are feeling are just growing pains. You are shedding the things and the people in your life that are holding you back. You aren't falling apart. You are falling into place. Relax. Take some deep breaths and allow those things you don't need anymore to fall off of you. Quit holding on to the pieces that don't fit you anymore. Let them fall off. Let them go.
Once I start doing that, what will be left of me?
Only the very best pieces of you.
I'm scared of changing.
I keep telling you, you aren't changing. You are becoming.
Becoming who?
Becoming who I created you to be. A person of light and love and charity and hope and courage and joy and mercy and grace and compassion. I made you for more than the shallow pieces you have decided to adorn yourself with, that you cling to with such greed and fear. Let those things fall off of you. I love you. Don't change. Become who I made you to be. I'm going to keep telling you this until you remember it.
There goes another piece.
Yep, let it be.
So I'm not broken?
Of course not. But You are breaking like the dawn. It's a new day. Become.
So if you'd like to bow down to the ground with us for the Grand Aleinu, I invite you to find place to do so. This is a good year to do it if you're here in the sanctuary, because there's actually room. And if you're at home, it's definitely a good year to do it. Let's rise.
Aleinu leshabeach le'adon akol latet gedula le'yotzer brechit shelo asanu ku'haratzot velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama shelo sam halkeinu kahem ve'goraleinu kechol hamona va'anaknu korim umishtahavim umodim modim Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
We continue silently.
V'hashevota
elevavecha
ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim v'hashevota elevavecha ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim ve'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. You may be seated. So our Rosh Hashanah Musaf contains 3 sections. That was sovereignty. And now Michael will be sharing with us a poem lifting up the next 2 sections of Zichronot, memory, and Shofarot.
A great horn sounds, calling you to remembrance, but all you can remember is how much you have forgotten. Every day for a month, you sit and try to remember who you are and where you are going. By the last week of this month, your need to know these things weighs upon you. Your prayers become urgent. Then the great horn sounds in earnest 100 times. The time of transformation is upon you. The world is once again cracking through the shell of its egg to be born. The gate between heaven and earth creaks open. The book of life and the book of death are opened once again, and your name is written in one of them, but you don't know which one.
Rabbi Alan Liu, Shakoach. We turn to the bottom of page 120. הרשת שפתנו ירב לפניך, אל רם ונישא. מבין ומאזין, מביט ומקשיב, לכל תקייתנו. ותקבל ברחמים וברצון, Seder, seder, shofrotenu. I'd like to invite Aiden and Oren Yorish to sound their shofars.
Tekiah! Shvarim Troa! Tekiah! 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 Shvarim! Tekiah! Tekiah! Troa! Tekiah!
Koach. This time, we begin to turn our thoughts to those who are no longer with us in body. And in preparation for the Mourner's Kaddish, I'd like to welcome Daniel Roger to lead us in a poem on page 121.
We remember them. At the rising of the sun and its setting, we remember them.
At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
At the rustling of the leaves and the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. For they are now a part of us as we remember them.
When we are weary and need of strength, we remember them.
When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them.
When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them.
When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them.
When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them.
As long as we live, they too will live. For they are now a part of us as we remember them. Asher koach. Collectively, we are still mourning for the countless lives that continue to be lost to COVID and the countless lives that continue to be taken by violence around our country and beyond. And we mentioned her last night, but of course, this is the first yahrzeit of a Jewish woman who let her tradition guide her path, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Zichrona Livracha. As we turn to page 122 for the Mourner's Kaddish, I invite those who are in mourning, whether mourning a recent loss in the past year or remembering a loved one on their yahrzeit, someone who passed this time of year, a year past. If you'd like to rise and share their names, put their names in the live stream we're looking, please do so.
Rory Gordon.
Marsha Robb, Janet Hirschfeld, Nathan Shapiro, and all those names in our hearts. Page 122. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shemei rabah, be'alma tidrach yehutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayetecho be'Yisrael, ba'agala u'v'zman karim v'imru. Amen. יהא שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה ולעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה. תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיא, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו amen. You may be seated.
May their memories be for a blessing. As we shared earlier, grief is complicated, grief is hard, and grief so often happens invisibly. In Jewish tradition, Rabbi Sharon Brous teaches that the mourner's Kaddish is an exercise in what it means to turn to people in mourning and say, I see you. They come and they say the mourner's Kaddish, and the community responds, doesn't even let them finish their sentence, interrupts them and says, Amen. I see you and I'm with you. Holidays are such a difficult time to be a mourner. And in services, we reach this moment of mourner's Kaddish. We lift something up. We feel the sense of sadness. And then we just keep going. But that grief is still there. It was just brought up to the surface. How do we allow ourselves to just sit in that pain and allow ourselves to cry? Well, we're here to tell you to cry, to allow yourself to feel whatever you are feeling right now, because the service might move on, but your emotions can fluctuate wherever they are. We turn to Aaron Hiller, who's going to come up and share some announcements.
Hello. My name is Aaron Hiller. I am Vice Chair of the Hill Havurah Board of Directors, standing in today for our Chair, Marlene Singer. To those of you joining us in person today, and to those of you joining online, on behalf of Hill Havurah's Board of Directors, welcome. It feels strange, this sort of halfway recovery our community has settled into these days. Our Gan Shalom preschool never closed because of COVID, although our kids spend most of their days outdoors. Yavna, our religious school, spent an entire year online and is now preparing to return in person, but with limited capacity and rigorous social distancing in place. Our services are now held both online and in person. And as I stand here in the sanctuary, although I am grateful at least some of us can worship together in person, I can only see the faces of the folks around me from the eyes up. Still, when I think back at the challenges this past year, a global pandemic, violence at the Capitol, storms and flood, I was listening, Jenna, the total implosion of the Washington Nationals, I feel much better about that joke after listening to Jenna's sermon. I find that it is this community that has sustained me. I hope you feel the same way. And no matter what the next year throws at us, I take great comfort in knowing that Hill Havurah will offer our families and friends a place to study and worship and drink deeply of Jewish life here on Capitol Hill. So I come to you with a request. Please invest in Hill Havurah. Note that I am not only talking about your financial support, although don't get me wrong, we could not survive for very long without your financial support, and we ask that you renew your membership and give generously to Hill Havurah throughout the year. But I'm also talking about an investment of your time and your children's time to continue the project of building this congregation we call home. If you have preschool-age children, or you are thinking about having preschool-age children, take a look at Gan Shalom, our amazing preschool led by Laura Vitello and a host of dedicated parents and teachers. Or you may want to join us for Tat Shabbat, a fabulous, musical, family-friendly service that my own babies, Joey and Alex, loved back when they were babies. For children ages 3 to 13, we offer Yavna, which meets every Sunday under the leadership of our new education director, Melissa Werba. You owe your kids a chance to learn from this amazing core of teachers who managed to put that Jewish stamp on my kids, even in an entire year of online teaching, even in the middle of a pandemic. Enrollment for Yavna is now open, and if you are on the fence for signing up for any reason, then I encourage you to attend our outdoor opening day Meet the Teacher Party on September 12th. You do not have to be enrolled to attend, and kids, you guys who are escaping in the back, there's going to be ice cream. Tell your parents, so come to this party, September 12th. For those of you not yet into the parenting business or out of the parenting business or just looking for a little enlightenment, I direct you to the wide range of religious services, religious events, educational programming, and opportunities for social activism that Hil Havurah offers and sponsors throughout the year. None of this programming slowed down because of the pandemic, and all of it is worth your time. And if all of this sounds amazing, and what we have built here is amazing, but you are either overwhelmed by the choices or are somehow not yet a member of Hil Havurah, then allow me to invite you to our new and prospective member meet and greet outdoors, also on September 12th. I'll see you there. I want to thank Rabbi Hannah, Michael Allen, and Jenna Shaw for leading this beautiful service. Because Marlene Singer is usually the one doing the thanking and so rarely thanked herself, I want to thank Marlene Singer, not only for leading our congregation and our board, but also for underwriting Jenna's rabbinic internship through a generous donation in memory of her parents, Molly and Lou Singer. These services would not be possible without the hard work of Executive Director Alan Schusterman and his assistant, Vera Abanqua, nor would we be here without the leadership of a host of volunteers, too many to mention. Our family service begins this afternoon at 3 online. Our top family service begins at 4 online. We will gather for Tashlich at Yards Park at 5:30. As always, details for all of these events can be found on our High Holidays webpage at hilhavurah.org. And we will gather again here for Kol Nidre on Wednesday, September 15th at 7:30 p.m. On behalf of Hil Havurah's Board of Directors, and from my family to yours, I wish each of you a happy and healthy New Year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Yasher Koach. Thank you, Aaron. And I'll add one thing to what he said, which isn't on the website, which is that we're starting to move away from breadcrumbs for Tashlich. To help out the wildlife, we're not going to be giving them breadcrumbs. We've got something else for you. So just bring yourselves. It makes your life easier, but try not to throw breadcrumbs in the water. Let's turn to page 124 for our closing song, Adon Olam. Adon Olam, Asher Malach, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעין עשה, וחפצו כל, אזי מלך, שמו נקרא, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, ואחרי ככלות הכל, לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה, והוא עובר, והוא יהיה, ותפארה, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, והוא אחד, ואין שני, להמשילו, להכבירה, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז, והמשרה, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך, 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא, מחו אלי, וחי גואלי, בצוח לי, בעת צרה, והוא ניסי, ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי, ביום אקרא, אדון עולם, 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 אשר מלך 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא אדון עולם 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 אשר מלך 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא בידו כי רוחי בעת ישן בהירה ועם רוחי גביעתי אדון עלי ולא יראה אדון עולם 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 אשר מלך 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא אדון עולם 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 אשר מלך 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 בטרם כל יציר נברא. We bless each other on top of page 125. Hashanah Tova Tikatevu V'Techatemu. May a good year be written and sealed for you. If you're at home and you've got grape juice, wine, challah, apples, honey, get them out. You might as well take advantage. Otherwise, we'll bless what we have here in front of us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Yehi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu shehachadesh aleinu shana tova umetuka.
Amen. Hashanah tova umetuka, a good year and a sweet year. So much gratitude for all of you for being here with your masks on this whole time and socially distanced. I know it's not easy for everyone, but it meant a lot to all of you who joined via the live stream. Jenna and I have been reading your comments. That means a lot to us as well. To everyone who played a role in the service. Andrew Logan for running this live stream. My husband David for helping him out. Everyone, thank you so much. And we will hopefully see you this afternoon. Tashlich, 5:30. Shkoach. Shana Tova. Oh, on your way out, you will find a treasure trove of books from Sig and Susan Cohen, founding members of the Havurah. They are gifts from them to you. Grab a Jewish book and have a beautiful new year.